Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our live today. Really excited to have a special guest from the SBA. Alex, many of you have seen him on before because the SBA has made some big changes for disaster loans. And this press release came out on Monday this week. So we're going to talk about the changes with disaster loans, not to be confused with the COVID EIDL loans. And so we got a lot to cover today in a limited amount of time, but I want to loop in Alex. Great to have you back.
Hey, thank you, Ryder. Thanks for having me again and giving us a chance to talk about some of these changes.
Yeah, it's always a treat, and I know a lot of the folks who in the skip community and others really appreciate a lot of the effort that's gone into. I mean, over the past couple of years, from raising the COVID EIDL rate loan amount to the 24 months deferment to all of the policy changes you and the team have been hard at work at. So it's great to hear your side of the story and then answer questions as well. So, I wanted to get started today. I'll give a little introduction for those of you tuning in for the first time. Alex is SBA director. What your exact title?
I'm a director of communications for disaster lending.
Yeah, and it's you're heavily involved in a lot of the policy changes there, and so we're going to get into the big announcement, which I'll preview here on the screen, which is this press release that came out on Monday. The U.S. Small Business Administration to offer disaster loans with no interest and no payments for the first year. So I think this is a great place to start because we don't want people to be confused with this versus COVID EIDL. And then after that, we can talk about COVID EIDL a bit more. But would love to hear your perspective on this announcement.
Yeah, this is a new policy change that we were really excited to announce this week. And just so you know, when we talk about disaster loans, we're talking about loans for homeowners and renters and businesses and nonprofits to help them with their physical losses. So to help them repair or replace damages from, whatever the disaster event might be hurricanes, flood, wildfire, something like that. Under those kinds of loans, we also provide small businesses with working capital like we do in the economic injury disaster loan program that we did for COVID. So disaster loans, just general term used to kind of describe, all of those different categories of disaster survivors. But this is a really great thing, I think, that's going to benefit disaster survivors, whether you're, a homeowner, a renter, or business. You will not accrue interest on the disaster loan on those funds that have been dispersed for the first 12 months. And that will help keep the costs of the recovery down and just give them a better opportunity to have a successful recovery by, keeping those costs down and avoiding financial hardship. And, all the other thing that we did at the same time was automatically extend the first payment due date out 12 months from the date of the note. So in most disasters, it's set at 5 months automatically. And for larger disasters, something like Hurricane Fiona or Hurricane Ian or something like that, where we're expecting tens of thousands of applicants, we'll extend it out, to a full year. In COVID, we did, as everybody knows, 2.5 years extension on the first payment due date. So this just kind of acknowledges what's been changing in disaster recovery, which is oftentimes it's taking people a little bit longer depending on the type of disaster. The debris cleanup could take longer. We don't want to rush households or businesses into making important decisions about their recovery. So sometimes they, have to decide, are they going to return to that same location? Maybe they're struggling finding a contractor or somebody to do the work. Maybe there's delays in getting permits and things like that. It really depends on the individual disaster event. But
Hmm.
5 months deferment on the first payment really, more and more wasn't really enough to give the individual borrowers enough time to get their recovery started before they started to have to make payments on the loan. And we just felt that 12 months was a much safer, much more reasonable amount of time to give them to start the recovery, start the rebuilding process. And that way they don't have to worry about payments until a full year after the date of the note. And then the interest actually starts a year from when the first disbursement is made, which is
Hmm.
even better because we don't start. They don't start to accrue interest until funds are actually dispersed, and they only accrue interest on the amount that has been dispersed. So in disaster loans for rebuilding, it's typically done in increments. They get an initial disbursement to sort of get the work started. And then after that, they provide to us some contractors' estimates and receipts and things showing us that the works, is ongoing. And then we work with them to schedule the other disbursements to complete the rest of the project,
And
rather than just doing.
and
Mhm.
how long does it typically take for all the disbursements? And while you answer that, I'll also bring up all of the active declared disasters, because I know um, a lot of folks watching have applied for some of these, especially from Hurricanes Fiona and Ian, and have gotten
Mhm.
working capital loans of various sizes, depending on typically what county they're in. But yeah, talk a little bit more about
Yeah.
the disbursements.
So it really depends. So that first disbursement is the one we try and get out um, as soon as we get the loan closing document signed and returned to us from the borrower. We're rushing to try and get that first disbursement out to them as quickly as possible. But after that, those other disbursements, it really depends on when the borrower is ready to receive them. I mentioned some scenarios where they may have trouble finding contractors, or they may experience delays in getting the proper permits and things there in the area. Maybe utilities and other services aren't returning as quickly as they would hope, or they might even be making decisions about relocating to a safer place. We oftentimes have homeowners that live in areas that are at high risk for flood. They live in a special flood hazard area. They may take this opportunity to use their disaster loan to relocate into an area that's outside of the flood zone and at a lower risk. And they can do that. So all of those are examples of why it might take them longer to request the additional disbursements. And just going back to that screen you were on showing those
Yeah.
declarations, um, when they look at those, when they click on an incident, if they go in there, there should be an effective date.
Hmm.
So you see there, the effective date is the actual date that that disaster was declared. And if it's on or after September 21st, 2022, then it is eligible for this new policy of the 12 months, no interest,
And that
and
was
the automatic.
intentional. Sorry
Mhm.
to. I assume that was intentional to specifically include Fiona and Ian when making this policy change, since I think I read $1.2 billion has already been distributed
Mhm.
for Fiona and Ian.
Yes. And so for anyone out there who already has a loan before this announcement was made, they will still get the benefit of the 12 months of 0% interest. They don't have to do anything. They don't have to contact us to request to enroll in it. We will automatically modify their loan and give them a 12-month period where we'll set the interest rate to 0%. And borrowers who already have loans that meet this criteria as far as the declaration date can expect to receive a contact from us probably beginning in January. So anybody out there listening who got a loan from Fiona or Ian or any of those other recent declarations, don't worry. There's no deadline to request this, or something that you need to do to enroll in it, we will contact you once we make the modification to your loan automatically.
And that'll be by email from the SBA.gov, I assume.
Yeah, most likely it'll be by
Yeah.
email. We always, anytime we do loan modifications, which is not uncommon, we have to do those quite often because maybe after we approve the loan, a borrower might get insurance proceeds or something later, and we might have to reduce and cancel some undispersed funds that before they go out, or something like that. We always confirm changes to the loan term with them with what we call a loan modification letter.
Absolutely. Well, I want to put a pin in this. Maybe we can clarify this policy change a bit more, right? Because certainly a lot of folks are wondering, okay, what's the difference between disaster loans and the COVID EIDL loans we've talked about before, but just probably worth mentioning again. And then also the big news is from last month was the hardship accommodation. And I know the SBA didn't officially want to announce that. Kind of would love to hear
Mhm.
your take on that, and
Sure.
how that's going so far.
Yeah, so the hardship accommodation plan is an option that we introduced for COVID EIDL borrowers. If you have a loan $200,000 or less, you can enroll in that plan by going through your CAFS account in the CAFS portal. It should only be used if you're experiencing a financial hardship, right? It's not, it's something we want to make sure that borrowers are aware that interest will continue to accrue on your loan. And so when you make a reduced payment using the hardship accommodation plan, that interest that you're not paying is going to be added to the balloon payment that you will owe at the end of the loan term. But what the hardship accommodation does is it allows borrowers to enter into a reduced payment period of 6 months where they can make 10% of the normal payment with a minimum of $25. And they can always make more if they want, but it allows them to schedule the payment down to 10% of the normal payment. And then at the end of that, if they're still experiencing hardship, they can request to re-enroll in that plan.
And
Again,
is
we're
that going to
hoping
be?
people. Go ahead.
I was going to ask, is that going to be a case by case basis? So let's say in May, when the 6 months deferment goes up, people will, maybe that's TBD, but people will have to then get in touch with the SBA directly if they need more help.
Well, right now the plan is that they will be able to re-enroll through the CAFS portal again. So they'll be able to do it just like they do the first enrollment. Now at the end, at that point, 6 months from now, we'll reevaluate if we're going to go beyond a second 6 month period or not. That's yet to be determined. It's still too early to know. So that's for borrowers that have loans $200,000 or less. They can do it. It's a streamlined process. It's very easy to do. For borrowers with loans over 200,000, they have to contact the COVID EIDL customer service center. I think you've shown the 833 number before, or they can actually, the better option is they should email disaster customer service at sba.gov, and then just in the subject line put hardship accommodation request, and the COVID EIDL customer service team will help connect them with the servicing team that will process the request. And the group of loans that are over $200,000 is much smaller percentage. We're looking at something like a 90-10 split.
Right.
About 10% of the portfolio of COVID EIDL loans are over 200,000. Much more of them are 200,000 or less.
And I'm not sure if you have any early data on how many people have been taking advantage of that. Might not be publicly available, but I guess how has it been going so far? We have heard anecdotally and, have some numbers on a lot of people have been taking advantage of this.
Mhm.
How's it been going on your end? Do you have a sense of how many people are opting into the hardship accommodation?
So I don't have any numbers as to how many have
Mhm.
or what percentage of the loans that are currently in repayment have opted into it yet. But I think we're seeing the same thing that you described, a high level of interest in the plan, just based on the volume of calls and emails and things that have come in for people inquiring about it. I just one important note that borrowers should know is that this option in the CAFS portal will not appear until they are within 60 days of their first payment due date. So if if your payment's not due until May, your first payment, don't worry that you're not seeing it in the CAFS portal right now. It will appear there once you're within 60 days. And if it doesn't, then you should contact the COVID Idle Customer Service Center, and they can do some investigating to see why it's maybe not there. But so that's the other thing too, is there's quite a few borrowers out there who haven't entered a repayment yet. They haven't gotten to the stage where the payment is due. And so we really don't know, how many of them out there, are experiencing a, serious financial hardship right now and need this plan. But it is available to people. So we are happy that it's assisting businesses.
Yeah, I think it's a great option, and the note that we've tried to emphasize as well is that, again, interest is still accruing. So really think about the pros and cons here. This isn't like a lot of these programs. Um, Sometimes people bundle in their mind the grants and the loan programs very different. So just we
Mhm.
try to emphasize that, and that's why I think what's really interesting about the no interest for a year for the disaster loans, and that's unique to this policy change. COVID Idle's never had that. Interest has always been accruing. Uh,
Right.
yeah, and
Yeah. Um, and just real quick, going back before I forget this thought on the hardship accommodation plan. I know I've seen some questions about, well, why did you guys introduce this now? Was there something, some underlying reason why you did that? Um, Providing a hardship accommodation is always something that we've done when we service disaster loans. The difference is we usually handle those on a case by case basis, right? So when a borrower is experiencing a financial hardship, reaches out to us and says, "Hey, I'm not going to be able to make this full payment." We then talk to them about options, and we look at their financial situation and see what we can do. But when you're talking about a portfolio the size of COVID Idle, that's close to 4 million loans, all entering repayment at close to the same time, we came up with the best option that we think was going to help provide the best customer experience for our borrowers.
mhm,
Because if we had to do that for that kind of hands-on case by case basis for close to even if it was just a percentage of that 4 million, you're
mhm,
talking about a huge volume of work, right? And the obvious consequences of that are going to be backlogs, delays, frustration by the borrowers, additional resources and things that we're going to need to get on our side in order to manage it. So this streamlined approach, I think, was an excellent option for us to avoid all of that, which is really, sort of like one of the lessons that we learned in managing the COVID Idle program at the front end, right? When we had to go through just the initial loan requests that came in, and then all the requests for reconsiderations and the requests for increases, which, people who went through that know that there were delays in that. And it took us a while, and a new team to come in and work through some of those backlogs.
absolutely. Yeah, you can imagine. Let's say I think you've shared these numbers before, but if a million loans were up for a payment this month, it's that magnitude. X percent of them
Mhm.
emailing disaster customer service at sba.gov, and yeah, even if it's
Yeah,
1%,
yeah,
that's overwhelming. So yeah, I think a lot of people have figured out how to log into the CAFS portal, and which brings to some of the other big technological changes that that are in the works. To help with repayments. This has been, we've talked about this before. Uh, Trying to bring together the new systems, not only for COVID EIDL, for disaster loans, but for other SBA programs as well, I believe, like 7As. So how's that going? I'm not sure kind of the latest dates in terms of when someone might have the new SBA portal. I don't know if there's a working name for it internally.
Yeah, we don't have any updates to share as far as the naming goes or any of that. All I can say is that we are still working on that. We are excited about when we'll get to announce that later on. It may not be until early next year when we get to roll that out, but this is something that's been a priority for the administration, for Administrator Guzman, and for the team at SBA to really, improve the customer experience, leveraging technology and improving that portal, not just for the COVID EIDL program, but for all disaster loans and other SBA lending programs. So I think the improvements, it's going to be significant. It's going to be an important one, and we're excited about the COVID EIDL borrowers getting to experience that. But we're still working on the the implementation and rollout for that. But something to look forward to for sure, because I know there's been some frustrations out there about some of the the legacy systems that they're using right now that were in place, and it's what we had to use. But a lot of the borrowers are kind of stating the obvious that this could be a lot more streamlined and user friendly and more intuitive, and so that's the kind of thing that we're working on.
Absolutely, and I think maybe the CA web CAFS pages has changed a little bit. So in case people are going there, I don't know if this is made aware, but I think that maybe the URL has updated. But the caweb.sba.gov should redirect to the payment. I just noticed this, or maybe it's a temporary issue.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'll have to look at that when we get off the call.
Yeah, but I think a lot. Yeah, anyway, so excited for that news, which I know will help people with payments. And I did want to ask about any other questions that you're hearing that people should know about, whether it's for COVID EIDL borrowers. We don't need to talk about EIDL grants, but if it's COVID EIDL borrowers or for disaster loans, questions that you're getting emailed about that you'd want to clarify.
Nothing that I'm getting emailed about. I mean, I think the big concern that was lingering out there was repayment assistance, right? I mean, I think a lot of people, because we did conduct a direct email campaign with the borrowers to make sure we were notifying them and reminding them that their deferment period was ending, that there was not going to be an extension of the deferment period, and that repayment was going to start. And I think, people got that, and, understandably, some of them were holding out hope for an additional extension. But, I think the concern was, well, if your business is, maybe it is now, or it still is experiencing a financial hardship, what options were available. And up until the release of the hardship accommodation plan, the guidance was, contact us and let's, talk to the loan servicing center if your loan is due now, which was for a smaller group of borrowers, the ones who got the earliest COVID EIDL loans. But now that the details are out there, I think it's kind of set some minds at ease, even for those people who payments aren't due yet. Their payments may not be due for several more months, but at least they know when it does come time, if they are experiencing a hardship, there are some options out there for them. And then also, maybe even a year from now or something like that, if they experience something, there's an option for them.
Yeah, I think it's great. I know you've expressed to me how you and the SBA team spend a lot of time thinking about, okay, for the 32 million small businesses in the US, what are the things that you can do? You can't solve everyone's business, but you can make those policy decisions to some extent to help people with repayments, help them, like the example you gave about maybe not getting a contractor in time or being able to do things in a short time frame. So some of these big changes allow people to lower their payments or not accrue interest over the year. So I think they definitely go a long way. We've heard that as well. I did want to ask, and I know Administrator Guzman didn't have the hearing today. I don't know if there's she's going to be talking to the Small Business Committee, the Senate Small Business Committee. Is that correct? I guess
The
any
House
news,
Small Business Committee.
the House Small Business Committee, and yeah, any news that you expect out of that, or things that she'll be sharing on behalf of the department?
There's nothing nothing I know of right now that is, uh, coming out here right away. And I don't know when the hearing will be rescheduled. So,
Okay.
if it's next week or if it's the week after that, I'm glad to come back and share whatever announcements, they might be making at the same time of the hearing, if there are any. But yeah, that hearing, we were expecting it was probably going to cover, a wide range of topics. It was described as just an oversight of the Small Business Administration, I think, and it could have covered everything from the status on the COVID relief programs, and then also the recent disasters that we've had this year, but also SBA's other programs we have. We've got guaranteed lending programs. We've got our veterans programs. There's government, and there's contracting. There's so many other things that the SBA does. So I'm sure
Yeah.
they probably would have covered quite a bit.
A lot of ground to cover. And yeah, for folks who've tuned in, we've got Alejandro from the SBA talking about some of the major policy changes. And for folks who have questions, you've offered this before too, you can leave them in the comments, and anything that we didn't clarify at the beginning or throughout this, we can follow up on and try to get clarity, because that's always our goal for anyone who's looking for disaster loans and you're in a declared disaster area. We'll link to this. We'll link to this in the description as well. Here are all the current disaster areas, and so for any of these after September 21st, you can now have no interest and no payments for the first year, as
Mhm.
Alejandro mentioned, and the same thing for for COVID EIDL and the hardship accommodation. So I guess anything that I didn't ask you that is worth mentioning or people should know.
Mhm. Yeah, just one thing. So, like, you have the screen up there. That list of declarations includes the presidential and the agency declarations. We have some other categories of declarations that aren't listed there because there's a lot of them. Yeah, there you go. Down at the bottom,
Mhm.
the Secretary of Agriculture declarations as well, which are just economic injury disaster loans. But I encourage people, to look on there, and see, especially if you're experiencing something from a specific event that you're aware of, whether it's a drought or a flood or wildfire or something like that, go to the site and check the declaration search tool to see if there's something that's covering your area. Um, and look at the program. It's really good, especially now that it's offering the 12 months of no interest, because oftentimes our disaster applicants, especially the businesses, are reluctant to take out a loan, right?
Mhm.
Especially right after a disaster, because there's so much uncertainty. But knowing that, they could take out the loan, and maybe if they, don't need it, or maybe if it's just for some expenses that are, pretty minor, they could use that money and pay it back within a year without having to incur any interest at all. And that wasn't ever really an option before that, or something that the disaster survivors looked at, because interest was always accruing the moment we dispersed any funds on the loan. But now you can think of it as, a 1 year no interest loan. If we're talking about a smaller amount, if you're talking about a much larger reconstruction project, then chances are, you're not going to pay it back within a year. But at least that year of interest is now deferred, and you can help keep the cost down.
Yeah, that's a great way of putting it. Basically, if you 50K or 100K working capital loan, whatever your case is, to give you, to have no interest and no payments for a year, in 11 months,
Mhm.
you want to pay it back in full, or you can pay it back in full. That's an option for you.
Yeah, the great thing about the disaster loans, obviously there's no application fees, there's no prepayment penalties, there's none of that. They're extremely flexible when it comes to disaster survivors. I think even on like late payments, there's not a late payment charge if you unfortunately end up in a situation like that. And they don't report the loan to your credit bureaus either. So I know some people might prefer that, like, well, I have this loan, I'm making my payments on it. I would like to have it reflected on my credit report. But there's also probably a lot more people who prefer not to, because you don't have that large debt showing up on your credit report, which might complicate things for you if you're trying to do, some other type of transaction, right? Because any creditor or lender is going to look and see what your loan balances are based on your credit report. And if they see, something large from a disaster loan, that might, hurt your score or something like that, because it's just outstanding debt that you're carrying. So it's also, in that respect, it's a positive for our disaster survivors. Helps their credit either maintain or improve much faster.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was going to try to pull up the total amount of funding, some numbers, just to share the context again. I know you emphasized this a few times over the past couple of years, but the scale, like the amount of loans that the SBA is approving now. Of course, COVID EIDL, almost 4 million for, I forget, 300 billion or something like that, is impressive. And yeah, and I know a lot of people in our audience, or connected to our audience, have it's saved their businesses and helped them get through this time. And certainly where we are now, people still are looking for help. So these things definitely help. My last question is, just to ask. It's probably too early to know, but besides the hardship accommodation, are there any policy discussions of other changes that are coming down that are in progress at the moment with regards to COVID EIDL?
So there's always discussions, right? The team at SBA is constantly looking for ways to try and support the small businesses that have those COVID EIDL loans. We don't have anything to announce right now, but again, if that changes, we'll definitely share it with you and your audience, because I know you guys follow the program closely, and you guys have a lot of borrowers that stay tuned in to hear the latest updates. But this is something that I just for just me personally, having worked at the SBA, and gone and been part of a response to a lot of large disasters, this is COVID. The experience from COVID was different in that, we haven't ever really received so much attention for the program. Like we've gone, through major disasters before, right? But they've always been limited in sort of like the footprint of where the disaster occurred. Hurricanes Katrina, Rita, Wilma, it was homeowners and businesses in the Gulf states, that were experiencing the loan process, and Superstorm Sandy, up in the, the New York, New Jersey area, and same thing with, Fiona and Ian right now in Florida and Puerto Rico. But this really got, like national attention of all the small businesses out there about the program. And I know, some of them had a positive experience. They got their loan that they needed, and some of them, they didn't get the loan, or they didn't get as much assistance as they had wanted, or maybe it took them a lot more effort going through the reconsideration process or something. But what they don't know is all the work, that the teams are doing in the background to try and improve the program, and to try and, ease the burden on not just the applicants, which was unique also because we had a change in administration, and we had a whole leadership change that came in and said, okay, we're going to do things differently now, and make some, really significant changes to the program, as far as like loan limits and how you could use the program and use the funds. But also now our focus is on those 4 million borrowers that, are going to have to repay the loans, because we've said this over and over and over again. We do not have statutory authority to forgive the loans, and that includes the interest that it has accrued on those loans. But what we can do is to try and, make the repayment process, give them some options, and try and make that, as easy as possible. So we'll continue to do that. And where we get openings to try and, provide additional relief, we definitely are exploring those. But as of right now, we don't have any additional approval or authority to do that. But it's something I can tell you the teams look at constantly.
Yeah, that's just that's great for people to hear, and the actions also show that things are always evolving. It's not just there was a policy in April 2020. No, it's been every few months. The public's been seeing a lot, and obviously a lot more is happening behind the scenes. And you've mentioned this before, but your remarks kind of made me want to reiterate this for everyone who, there are lots of resources out there. If you didn't know about the SBA prior to 2020, now you do. And so maybe COVID EIDL was the gateway. At least the grants were the gateway, because I think 6 million folks got the COVID EIDL grant, more or less. So now people know that there's a lot of resources available, not just funding, but other resources to help you as an entrepreneur and business owner. So just want to reiterate that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And well, as always, Alex, it's a pleasure to talk and hear directly about some of these changes, and really appreciate your time.
All right. Thank you, Ryder, and we'll keep in touch.
Absolutely. And thanks everyone for tuning in, and we'll give a recap of everything we talked about in the notes and on our blog as well, in case you didn't catch us at the beginning. And we'll see you all next time. Bye-bye.